Okay, let's load some data in from the AdventureWorks, and I'm going to use the currency table here to open up and open up this. There is, if you scroll down a little bit under sales, there is this currency table, and I'm going to load the data from the currency table into my dimension table down here in another database, my own data warehouse down here. And to do that, I'm going to use a set of tools that Microsoft has, and I bundled them together underneath something called the SQL Server Business Intelligence Development Studio, or BIDS for short. So if I click on that, let me bring him up. This is really sort of a version of Visual Studio, and this is Microsoft's integrated development environment for all of its development efforts nowadays. And you can actually do development work for SQL Server in this as well. Even if you don't have Visual Studio initially installed, when you install SQL Server, if you elect to install BIDS, it will give you this particular version of it already in. Now, what I want to do is I want to do a new project, open up a new project. It's going to open up and ask me what sort of project I want, and it's going to be a business intelligence project. Specifically, this time I want an integration services project, and I'm going to call this name of this project, I'm going to call this currency load. And I'm going to also call this the solution currency load solution. And I'm going to say OK. It's going to crank a little bit, and what it's going to do is going to generate under Solution Explorer the project, a project that will allow me to begin developing this currency load that I want to do, the data load. And it's really a great interface here. If this is the solution, this is my currency load solution. The currency load here underneath this is the project itself. Actually, for complicated solutions where I'm doing a lot of different things, I could have multiple projects, one after the other, in this structure here. Okay, over here, what it's also opened up is a series of tabs, and the control flow is the main thing. This is where I go and begin telling it what I want it to do, and then a real critical thing is the actual flow of data, which is the second thing that we'll be doing. And then there's some event handlers that we will not use that you know, that certain events transpire in your database or in this process, it will trigger certain kinds of activities. And a package explorer just allows us to look at things in a little more detail. So we'll be concentrating on these first two things. Down below, there's something called connection managers, and this is where I'm going to start. I'm going to need, it says right click to add a new connection manager to the SSIS package. I'm going to need a couple of those. I'm actually going to need a one for the source and eventually one for the destination as well. I'm going to use what's called a new OLADB or OLAE. It stands for Object Linking and Embedding. That's a technology Microsoft has used for a long time that connects various objects together and so they can talk to each other under a set of rules. I'm going to use this a new connection here, and it comes up with a little wizard kind of thing, connection manager. I'm going to delete the ones that are already there from prior activities, so you can see what's involved in developing new connections. It's not hard as long as you sort of understand the overall flow. I'll click new here, and it cranks and gives me this activity under connection manager. Asks me, okay, what server do I want to use? And I may have more than one SQL server. In this particular machine, I've only got one instance of SQL Server, so I'll click there. If I had 2 or 3 different instances throughout my network or whatever, it would show me those as well. I select this one. Then it asks me, how do I want to authenticate? I'll continue to use my Windows authentication. And then it says, okay, within your SQL Server, which particular database do you want to connect to? And these are all the databases I have in there, and I'm going to be connecting to AdventureWorks. And I want to test my connection just to make sure that it was okay. And it says, yeah, it's successful. That's good. So I click OK here, and it adds this to it. And if I say OK, it puts it there, and it's kind of a long, difficult name and to use. It's not very friendly, so I'm going to rename it, and I'm going to call it source. And I'm going to need a destination one, as I said earlier, so I will right-click again, and I'll go through essentially the same process, and I want a new one. And similar screen. You've seen them before. It's looking for the SQL servers that are around. It finds this mine. Again, same authentication. This time it's going to be my destination. It's going to be my own. So I want to connect there. I'll test the connection again just to be sure it's successful. And I say OK. And now I say OK. And again, I want to rename it to something a little more descriptive. And we'll call this destination. Now I'm ready to use some of the tools that are over here, and if you click on this, it opens up a toolbox that this particular development environment has, and there's an enormous number of tools, things I can actually do to manipulate data, structures, do all sorts of things here. And if you scroll down, you can even see more options below in terms of what's available. And it's just really incredible. And all I have to do is sort of drag and drop them on these design surfaces, and I get a lot of built-in functionality, and it will generate some code for me. So the first thing I want to do is I want to drag a data flow task on this, and it gives me this sort of icon sitting there. And I need to tell it to do some things. So before I can do that, I will click on the data flow tab to be able to do that, and I'm going to drag a data source. So I go back to my toolbox, and I'm going to drag an OLE DB source over. And it's a connection manager, but I haven't assigned a connection manager yet to the runtime connection, this particular guy. But I've got connection managers down here that I've already pre-assigned or predefined that I can use. So I can double click on this guy. And up comes this source editor. And it says, okay, what is it you want to use? Well, I don't want to use the destination. I want to use my source as the connection. And it says, okay, now what table or view do you want? Well, remember in AdventureWorks we were using that sales dot currency. So if I scroll down here, there oops, nope, that wasn't the right one. Misfired on that guy. There he is there. So I say OK. And now I've linked it to a source. There's a green line. Don't worry about the red one. It'll go away in a bit. So now I've linked it to a source. And next thing I want to do is I want to use the dimension wizard that's here to help me define my dimension tables and how it's going to move the data from my source to the dimension. And that particular guy, I'll drag the slowly changing dimension over here and click back up to my source, drag this connection arrow here into my dimension wizard, and double click on him, and up comes the dimension wizard itself. So it says, okay, the connection manager here is it needs a select a dimension table to load and map columns in the transformation. So now it's selected for me the dimension, a destination rather connection here. So that's good. And now I have to select a table in the destination I want to map to. Well, I've already defined currency earlier, so I'll select that one. But there's some work I have to do here. It wants me to take the input columns. These are the columns that contain the data coming from my adventure work, and it wants me to map it into what these columns are called. So if you move it over just a little bit, you can see that it's got something called a current alternate key. This is the actual primary key in the original data, which it turns out to be called currency code. And we are going to use it as a business key. That means it was a primary key in the original table. And there's something called currency name that I called that column, and I'm just going to use name here, and I'm not going to use modified date at all. So now I've basically mapped my original data source into the columns in my dimension table in my other database. So I do a next. It asks me what kind of dimensions are these. There's actually three different, these attributes here. The dimension column itself, it's only got one of them. A currency name. Now it can be a fixed attribute. Obviously that means that it's never going to change. It can be a changing attribute. That means that when it changes, we'll just update it here and go on about our business. Or it could be a historical attribute, which means we want to track the changes, and the dates when it started and when it stopped and when it changed. So I'm going to make it pretty easy. I'm going to just do changing attribute, just let it update. So I'll come over here and click on this pull down and say this is making him a changing attribute. And then I'm going to go through some other options and not select it because they're not relevant to what we're doing here. So I'm done. It's going to be I basically mapped it, and I've finished it. It's going to crank a little bit, and then it's going to add some of the flows down below here for me, and I'll be able to take a look at those. Here they are here, and it's going to, if I scroll up a little bit, here's my my source. The wizard itself is going to generate some code that's going to put this information in my flow into my destination here. So I can come over here and I can actually run this package. I can execute the package now. So let me do that. And it'll go through and it's actually doing the moving down according to the code that's been generated behind the scenes by these graphical icons. And it will change either yellow, green, or red depending upon what occurs. And these are all greens. In fact, it says what it did is it went from the destination. It took the destination using the specifications I highlighted in the changing dimension wizard. It routed 105 rows in this direction and none in any other direction. So I should have 105 rows now sitting in my my new data warehouse. So if I come over here and look at the this currency dimension table in my own data warehouse, if I right click on it and just say let's edit the top 200 rows of this guy and see what they look like, it should give me all 100 plus rows, and this is what it does. You can scroll down and see that I've loaded the data from here. So I've moved information from the original data store, AdventureWorks, into my new dimension table. And I would repeat this process, albeit with a lot more steps involved, because if these dimension tables increase in complexity. But that's the tool. That's the basic tool that I would continue to use. So next we'll talk about the fact tables.